We would also like to introduce the next team, Team Apollo.
Yeah, currently there's around 70 million children who lack in primary school education, and even more adults who are illiterate, according to current recent studies. And this literacy also links into the problems with poverty and the parents not being able to gain jobs with higher pay.
From the prophetic words of Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And addressing this education disparity, we would like to welcome you, Team Apollo. Bill Kunamoto, Nicole Ma, Maggie Chen, and Jack Edwards.
So, good morning everyone. We are Team Apollo, named after the Greek god of knowledge. Our mission today is to strengthen the bonds of the global education network. We aim to unite a group of individuals to work towards a common goal for the benefit of all. Now, Jack will talk a little bit about Ecuador.
Ecuador is a nation of 15 million located in northwestern South America, bordering Colombia and Peru. It contains coastal lowlands, mighty Andean peaks, and a portion of the dense Amazon rainforest. Close to a third of the population lives in poverty, with many of the impoverished living in rural Andean and Amazonian communities. Generally, most of the population has access to education. The majority of adults are literate, and there are a number of schools and universities throughout the country.
However, access to this education is not universal. Despite school being mandatory until the age of 14, this is not reality for the entire country. Rural schools have limited resources, and rural and indigenous populations lack access to education. We believe that we can have the greatest positive impact on these communities by allowing to have access to quality education.
So, of course, for today, we would like to introduce why is this a problem, this lack of access to education. So, one of our goals for today is to impress upon you all the critical importance of the relationship between education and social development. So, for our purposes, we'll be defining social development as the improvement in the general quality of life within a community. So in order for us to come to this conference today with complete and utter confidence in our ideas and beliefs, we took our research to a global level in order to identify scenarios of critically lacking education. So we found that education has a clear relationship with poverty. For example, the World Bank identifies Ethiopia as one of the poorest countries in the world. And studies have revealed that only 3% of household heads in Ethiopia have gone through secondary education. So this demonstrates the relationship between education and social development at a fundamental level. So clearly, poor levels of education correlate to economic disadvantages. So these numbers are not uncommon among impoverished countries and are in drastic need of change. This is a change that we seek to both implement and inspire.
Numerous reputed scholars propose that lack of education is a major contributor to social development. It will severely impair it, identifying it as a major contributor to not only poverty but also inequality and employment. Those with education have a higher and faster employment rate as opposed to those with minimal or zero education.
So as we look deeper into the education-social development relationship, we discovered many scholars who propose that this relationship is not as simple as it may seem. So significant improvements to social education cannot simply be achieved through the spread of education, but require an improvement in the quality of the education delivered. This, as you will see later, is a significant factor in our solution proposal.
So there are also many societal benefits to greater levels of education. For example, our research suggests that greater levels of education actually leads to a decrease in domestic violence. So that is, the greater numbers of years a person has of education, the less chance they are to suffer from domestic abuse as well as commit it.
In addition, there is a positive causal relationship between increased levels of education and improved population health, demonstrated by correlations between increased education levels and an increase in life expectancy at birth and decrease in rates of infant mortality. In addition to this, schools can encourage students to take part in discussion and decision-making, cultivating important organizational and leadership skills. Now Nicole will talk a bit about our solution to this problem.
Our solution is a program of building sites in the rural areas of Ecuador, namely the provinces of Cotopaxi, Napo, and Pichincha. The terrain of these provinces make it very, very difficult to access education, especially quality education. We will be conducting these projects through volunteers within the schools and paid construction workers.
In addition, education professionals will be brought along on our program to conduct workshops teaching educational techniques to local teachers, ensuring the quality of education provided at our school. We are confident that our solution will work due to the demonstrable success of similar projects undertaken in the area, for instance by Free the Children, Youth International, and Mully Children's Family.
We just have a
In addition to the benefits to the community, the volunteers themselves will benefit from this experience.
Coming here and seeing the landscape and where we've stayed has just been so different from anything that I've experienced before. Everything here is so beautiful, and my impression was incredible. I mean, you walk into the towns and the villages and they all smile, they're all curious to meet you. I've gone 17 years of my life not knowing that this poverty has occurred in the world, and it's kind of shocking.
You meet these people and you see just how talented they are, how strong and confident they are.
Once you've been here, it's nothing like what I've learned before.
So one of the areas where we differ from these organizations that have previously gone to conduct these volunteer experiences is through a conference that we will hold at the conclusion of our volunteer trip. So we will gather the volunteers in order to discuss what they have learned and their experiences, and conduct video interviews with the participants in support of an awareness campaign. So through this conference, we seek to spread knowledge of both the issue of access to education as well as of our own organization to the general public. So in this way, we believe that we will continue to uphold our goal of using education to forge connections between active members of the global community. So this brings us to the end of our solution proposal. However, in order to make this solution feasible, we put a great deal of effort into formulating a budget that would cover all aspects of our proposal. So please enjoy as Nicole takes it away for the first part of our budget.
Our $20 million budget will mainly be used towards constructing the schools and paying the expertise. That is engineers, doctors, and education professionals. We're going to plan to use a quarter of our budget towards the 3 construction sites with $1.6 million approximately towards every school. In constructing a school, we have looked into the account of Ecuador's climate, resources, and price disparity. With the $1.6 million, we're able to not only pay for the plumbing system, but also create the sustainability, electricity, and furnishing.
So aside from the cost of the 3 schools, we propose that approximately $3.5 million will be used to cover the cost to hire expertise to make this project happen. We will be hiring an engineering consulting firm to design all 3 schools suitable to its environment. As Nicole said, each school will be built to sustain. Part of the money will also go into the salaries as well as expenses such as accommodation, meals, and transportation of teaching professionals, photographers, translators, facilitators, medical services that we will be bringing along, as well as local construction workers who will work along with students that will come on our trip. Roughly $50,000 of our budget will go towards raising awareness, renting venues, as well as equipment for the conferences. And so as you can see, our budget does not require the full $20 million. So we suggest that excess funds be invested for future projects. So now that concludes our budget, and
in order to maximize the effects of our funds, the expenses of volunteers will not be paid for. For instance, their meals, transportation, and accommodations. In order to cover this cost, each volunteer will be required to pay a fee of roughly $4,000. Not only will this ensure the majority of our funds go directly to our project, but it will ensure that we only receive volunteers who are dedicated to our cause. Now Will will conclude.
Okay, so I guess one other thing that we would really like to stress as a critical value to ourselves as an organization is that we recognize ourselves as a source of foreign aid, and as such, we will do our utmost to minimize the cultural influences we have on the communities that we seek to help. In order to convince you of our commitment to this, we would like to point to the cultural value known as Minca that is present among the people of Ecuador. So Minca is a cultural tradition that embodies gathering a group of individuals to work towards a common goal for the benefit of all, which, as you can see, clearly mirrors our own initiative. So this is significant in that we believe that it brings our presentation into a full circle, and it re-emphasizes our dedication to strengthening the bonds of the global education network. With this in mind, we believe that our solution will not only meet success from an education standpoint, but of equal importance, we will both respect and complement the cultural values already present within the people of Ecuador. So this brings us to the conclusion of our presentation, and I believe I can speak on behalf of all of the Apollo members to offer our humble thanks for your attentiveness as an audience. We would also like to offer a big thank you to David Lowe as our conference organizer who worked directly with the team members. Of course, extending this thank you to the rest of the conference organizers, the media team, and of course, Dr. Erica Patterson for mentoring us through this whole process. So again, thank you very much.
So we're now going to open up the floor to the whole class if you have any questions and concerns for Team Apollo.
Jack, I just had a question regarding your volunteers. I'm just curious what kind of demographic you're looking at for your volunteers, given that they're paying $4,000 and you're looking for dedicated people. And I'm wondering, it just seems like as a student personally, like this isn't something I probably can afford. So if that probably excludes most of us as volunteers, who are you looking at?
Generally, we're looking towards secondary and post-secondary students, and this practice of having volunteers pay their own way on these sorts of trips is pretty much standard. Youth International does it, so does Free the Children, so does Mully Children's Fund. Getting them to pay their own way ensures that they don't see it as just some vacation to the exotic location. They know that they are going to have, through paying, that they show that they are dedicated to the work that they will be doing there.
Great.
I have a question actually. What separates you from Free the Children, who you've drawn a lot from the We to We and stuff, initiatives like that? What separates you guys from them, and why would volunteers choose you over them?
Well, I'm very glad you asked, David. So I guess there are two major things I believe that truly separates us from Free the Children. One, as we went over in our presentation, was in particular the conference. Another one, I believe, is how we plan to deliver education professionals to conduct workshops. I believe that this is quite a unique process because, again, as our research has indicated to us, that it's not just the build. You can't just build a school, leave, and expect them, everyone to become educated and everyone to benefit from this education. But we really, really would like to stress how important it is for us to improve the quality of the education delivered, and that's where our education professionals are coming into our solution. And I believe, again, this sets us apart from other organizations.
Well, I have a question about building the school, because you also need to acquire land and permits from the government. Will you be working with the government, or how will you be doing this?
We also looked into that aspect too. From what we know, we would have to contact the government because it is a form that we can't just go in there and build something without any regulations or without any consensus from the government. So we will be coming in contact with the government.
Does anyone else have any questions?
So considering the environmental and monetary costs of bringing volunteers from Canada to Ecuador, why do you think that would be preferable to hiring builders in Ecuador?
But we also think that local construction workers have more experience in their own environment, so that we're saving transportation and we're acquiring their expertise. So that's a double benefit.
So no, so I was asking, why not use only Ecuadorian builders?
Well, in addition to building schools, we're also hoping to raise awareness of both the issue of lack of access to education and as well as our own organization. By using volunteers from our own country, that makes it local, sort of brings it home, so to speak, which raises the issue not just in Ecuador, but here as well.
And building upon Matt's question, since you're a relatively new organization, how are you gonna kind of reassure parents sending their children to this remote location? They've never been there before. They don't know what it's like. Other organizations, they've been around for quite a few years, so they have an established reputation and they know what they're doing. But then you're a new organization. How will you kind of convince parents, because they are paying? Some of them will be paying for their child's expenses.
Well, I believe that you raise a very good point. I think that safety is definitely a prime concern for particularly parents in Western communities. I know probably my own mom and dad would be probably very interested in what us as an organization would be doing to ensure our volunteers' safety. So we've definitely done a lot of research because we have the repeatability, the previous successes of other organizations. So we've really looked already into, for example, sample itineraries that are being presented from other organizations, and also looked into, well, what sort of things do the price of the volunteers cover that they pay. So we will cover. We've observed that, for example, organizations like Free the Children offer a 24-hour facilitator service and also a 24-hour emergency services to all volunteers that come along this trip, which we obviously completely support, and that will definitely be a big concern for us in terms of ensuring that an emergency service is always provided for any volunteer that should sign and go with us to Ecuador.
Adding on to what Will just said, a sample itinerary and volunteers, what volunteers have is also located in our website.
I have one idea. Did your budget include any money for marketing the program, of the volunteer program? Because maybe that's what you need to consider, is maybe putting aside some of your budget and bringing in a consultant that markets your program so that there's a sense of confidence amongst the people who might be sending their children. Also, if you were to put this together as a not-for-profit organization, that would involve bringing together a board of directors, and that's often your first line to clientele. You know, you find people who are on school boards and things and ask them if they want to be involved, and then they have, you know, they send their kids, and then once you have a round of volunteers having gone and succeeded, and nobody gets killed. But it's a very, very good point that you guys actually picked up. You've actually picked up the really only weakness that I saw in this whole presentation. So good for your audience for thinking of that. But it's an easy problem to solve. Just you know, assign a few $1,000, bring in a marketing consultant, and say we need to have a level of confidence in this. Put together a board of directors. Are better people.
In addition to sort of assure parents, all 3 of the locations that we have chosen for this project are all very close to the capital city of Quito, which, so if the parents ever get concerned or the child ever gets concerned and wants to go home, would not be a huge issue to send them back. It would be within a day of capital city, and then it would just be a couple of plane rides back home.
And lots of young people do this kind of thing.
And one last thing, I suppose, is just we have looked into the political stability of Ecuador, so we're not sending these children into like a potential civil war or something like that. Obviously, Ecuador is a politically stable country as far as civil wars, and just a minimized amount of danger that we're sending.
And how long is the program? How long do the volunteers sign up for? Is it 28
20
days?
yes.
$4,000, 28 days. Yeah.
James.
I had a question about the type of education that these people experience. Now, it's been shown before in many places that has been had these kind of education going through. A lot of the education that prepared them was, for example, like working in sweatshops or working in basically like factories and things like that. So how is this going to be different? How is this kind of employment going to be different from that kind of employment that other places that the experience and other things have?
Once again, very good question.
I'm not quite sure I understood what you were asking. I'm sorry.
Okay, for example, in a lot of countries, for example, during the colonization period, they sent educators to teach. For example, Mexico as an example, they teach them Spanish so that they could work in gum tree plants, for example, like that. Now, when you go there to educate them, what kind of jobs are waiting for them once they come out of these schools? Are they going to be doing civil service work? Are they going to be working in factories? What kind of work are waiting for them?
Okay, so I guess, one thing that I can think of really immediately would be just the idea, as you actually presented in the beginning of our conference, is how the internet is spreading. The internet is definitely a power that we can use. So definitely if we can educate these children about how to use the internet in terms of how to use it to their advantage and how to get access to better opportunities outside of school will definitely be something that will be very important to us. So I think, to answer your question, educating them in terms of how to use the internet, I believe, would be the most effective way to help them outside of their school in terms of also not ending up in a situation of child labor.
I think that will conclude their presentation for Team 5.